The speakers at today's conference was Kuseni Dlamini, the chairman of Massmart as well as Aspen Pharmacare Holdings. He is, of course, the former CEO of Old Mutual South Africa and Emerging Markets. Kuseni Dlamini joins us now. Great to have you with us.
Thanks indeed.
So Africa's a big place, and it's always hard to talk about Africa, but if we see it as a whole, once the forgotten continent maybe, then this light with these incredible growth rates, then of course that all changed with commodity prices a few years ago. What was the sentiment today, and overall, how do you think we're feeling about the prospects for our continent right now?
I think in a word I would say the sentiment was subdued today, and for obvious reasons, as you've just highlighted, that the IMF has revised its growth forecast downwards to 1.4% this year, and this is
that cuts it in more than half, basically.
Indeed, it cuts it more than half, which just indicates the adverse impact of the drought situation across the continent, the tightening of financing terms for African markets, and of course the point that you've just mentioned, the fall in commodity prices, and especially oil producing countries have been battered severely, as have been mineral resources producing countries. But what is encouraging this time around, Francis, is that African economies are coming out strongly, and they're showing their resilience in the sense that they have not really fallen below zero in terms of growth. Africa is still the second largest growing continent in the world after Asia, and the projections that are out there, they don't look good in the short term, but in the medium to long term, if African countries do the right thing to diversify their economies, invest in human capital, in maximizing the quantity and quality of their human and intellectual capital, turning the youth population into a demographic dividend, I think Africa is destined for growth.
For years we've been saying Africa needs to diversify. Is it happening? Or are we just beating the same drum?
Increasingly, as I travel from time to time around the continent, I'm seeing more signs of diversification. I'm seeing new industries beyond just your traditional mining and agro-based industries. You're seeing the rise of telcos, rise of financial services, the famous M-Pesa in East Africa. We're seeing renewable energy industries. And also you're seeing a palpable sense of young entrepreneurs coming to ask to be given opportunities, not just handouts, to be given opportunities to demonstrate what they can do. I once visited the Innovation Hub in Nairobi. Just amazing just to listen to some of the brilliant business ideas that are being generated there. And I will argue that some of them, if they're given enough airtime globally, they could be as good as Facebook or LinkedIn or Uber. We just need to make sure that we globalize African innovation and we actually showcase youth entrepreneurship. Why is it that M-Pesa is not one of the top global platforms in the world? Maybe simply because it was started in Africa, and as Africans we did not do a good job in globalizing it and showcasing it to the rest of the world.
Earlier this year you wrote in the Sunday Times about leadership. Do you think that is crucial? Is that why we're seeing African economies, say like Rwanda and some others, heading off on a very different trajectory? Is leadership policy making crucial?
I think leadership is so critical. It's an indispensable prerequisite for sustainable global competitiveness. We're seeing what Rwanda has done with their one-stop shop concept and the friendliness towards investors, and what President Kagame has done there. And we need to reset the conversation around growth in Africa if we are to grow at above 5%, as indeed we must if we are to create more jobs on a sustained basis. We need to build the capacity to be able to execute the right policies. And we also need to perpetually work on winning and reinforcing global and local investor confidence. It's unfortunate in a few countries, you've seen some presidents changing constitutions, and you've seen some attempts at coups here and there. That's unfortunate, but what is good is that that's an exception rather than the norm. The majority of African countries still remain democratic, they're still consolidating law and order, they still remain business friendly, and we need to build on those examples and make sure that we turn Africa into a first world continent within a generation, as indeed I think we can and must.
Does that apply to South Africa? Do you think we still remain business friendly?
I think South Africa has got a lot to do. The recent events around the charging of the finance minister have not been helpful. It's been an own goal of some sort, but I think now that that has come and gone, the NPA has reversed and withdrawn the charges, we really need to reset the conversation around growth. We need to reset the conversation around the implementation of the National Development Plan. We have a good NDP, nobody quibbles with it, but we're just not good with the discipline of execution to unlock the desired results. The fact that our economic growth is still above zero, pedestrian as it is at 0.5% as announced or projected by the finance minister this year. But if we look at South Africa against countries like Brazil, Russia, and other emerging markets like Turkey, which are facing recessions and indeed have been downgraded to junk status, I think we're in a great space to really avoid a downgrade, but look beyond just avoiding a downgrade, start recasting the conversation to say, how do we improve the investment rating that we have? The focus now, which is fine, it's about fending off a downgrade, which is excellent, but I will argue that we need to look further than that and make sure that we look at improving, consistently and perpetually improving our investment grading.
Well, I hope we can get there soon. What about the benefits of trade, Africans trading with themselves? Let's look at Massmart. I think you're in 12 African countries. Years ago, Whitey Basson was saying, no, you're not really there, but you do have a presence. And does that make a difference to retailers, to pharmaceuticals, when growth here is so low? How has it changed the fortunes of the companies that have looked to the rest of Africa?
So that's a very important point. I think without regional economic integration and free trade within Africa and the free flow of investment across borders, the extent to which we can grow on a sustained basis is likely to be limited. We really need to encourage intra-regional trade, and we need to lift all the barriers to trade. I mean, from a retail perspective, one of the challenges we face is really the issue around logistics and regional supply chains and clearing customs, and we need to be able to just deal with all the bottlenecks there, because the opportunity is there. We are having a rising consumer class in Africa, an emerging middle class, and that is going to propel the growth of the African continent if it is properly harnessed. I mean, as Massmart, we're very excited about the prospects of growing and expanding our business profitably across the continent.
Okay, so that's still a major focus. Even when things are tough, you still have the opportunity to look at what's expected in Africa in years to come.
If you're to win in Africa, you need to have a long-term perspective. And the greatest risk about investing in Africa is not investing in Africa. Yeah. It is really the next frontier of opportunity from a global, and dare I say even a regional investment perspective.
All right, thank you so much for your time this
indeed.
evening. That was Kuseni Dlamini, the chairperson of Massmart, at that conference today, focusing on the risks to what could happen in Africa, hopefully.